Well, welcome back, folks, to the Sessions Family Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame and Museum broadcasting live. My name is Darren Potke. Another series on our catching up with various Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame members. And today we're very much honored to be joined by 2008 class Georgia Tennis Hall of Famer Armistead Neely. Armistead, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Darren?
Great. Really appreciate you joining us today. So we've, of course, now been through the coronavirus pandemic now for what, almost 5 months. I'm just curious, what have you been doing with your time trying to stay healthy and safe during this interesting time we're living in?
Well, it's been a trying time for me personally. I've had medical issues. I went from playing in Klosters, Switzerland, played the doubles over there for fun, their national championship, their open national championship, and these gorgeous alpine courts at about 5,000 feet, and then playing our national clay courts in Pinehurst, which is a beautiful spot,
Sure.
in North Carolina. And from there, diagnosed with cancer and going through chemo and big surgeries and all that kind of stuff. So now I'm just, my job is to try to get to where I can get my balance back and get fit enough to get out there and pound some balls.
Yeah, well, you're definitely on the mend, and everyone's sending you good vibes and thoughts. So that's great that you're in the recovery phase.
Thanks.
Armistead, you when I was doing some of the research on your background, I mean, it's again very consistent with a lot of our other Hall of Fame members. Just an amazing set of contributions both on and off the court. So when you got started, you were down in the Tampa area, right? Where you grew up, and how did you get started? And maybe talk about some of your junior thoughts and your success in the juniors.
Well, I was raised until I was about 6 in Mobile, Alabama. My father transferred down to Tampa, Florida. It so happened that there was a tennis club about a quarter-mile away that my mother discovered, and she said, "Get your fanny down to this tennis courts. That's where I want you to stay." And I did, and I loved it. And so that's how I started under the tutelage of two great men, Calhoun Dixon, whose nephew, Mark Dixon, ended up being in the top 50 in the world at one stage. But he was a fine player, best player in the South in his heyday in the early 60s. And then Vernon Markham was my other pro and mentor. And these people, I have to hats off to all the coaches who are mentors to juniors, because they paved the way to what kind of character that person is going to be. And there's a lot to be said for not just a coach, but a second father. And that's what they have to be, in my opinion. But Vernon Markham was a contemporary of Don Budge and played against those guys. And he taught me the game. And I was just thrilled to be around these guys. And playing junior tennis in Florida, in those days, in the early 60s, there were three powerhouses: the state of Florida, the state of California, and Texas. And the rest, there were spots of good players here and there in the Midwest, Chicago, New York, et cetera, but not too many. Those were the three hotbeds of tennis, because of course it was warm weather year round for the most part, and that's where you played a lot of tennis. California and Florida had a big advantage, I think, because they're resort areas, and because they're resort areas, the administrators of municipalities build tennis courts to entertain the visitors and attract visitors, and those tennis courts can be used by the residents, of course. So there are just a gazillion tennis courts in Florida and California for that reason, that municipalities support that idea.
Yeah, that's amazing. We've got some great mentors and coaches in this Hall of Fame. I mean, two that come to mind are Jerry Baskin and Branch Carrington. I mean, guys that have dedicated their lives to trying to help juniors progress both on and off the court. So I'm so happy that you were able to find those coaches that they really helped you. So when it came time to decide to go to school, maybe a no-brainer, right? You chose the University of Florida. So what attracted you to the University of Florida? Was it the coach? Was it your mom basically telling you you need to stay close to home? What was the binding decision why you decided to go to Florida?
Well, that was sort of the infancy of full rides to colleges in the early 60s. I'm not sure what happened in the 50s. I'm not sure how many scholarships were available. But in the 60s, it became a lot more available. I've got a good number of offers from tennis interested schools. So full rides were available. There were unlimited numbers of scholarships, unlike today where there are limitations on how many scholarships a school can give.
Okay.
But so my offers were from Trinity University, which is, of course, where Chuck McKinley and Frank Brolin went to school.
San Antonio. Yep.
Wonderful players in their day. And from West Point, I got an appointment to West Point, which was problematic because I was wondering how in the world I was going to keep up with tennis and be a good military man at the same time. To Georgia Tech and the University of Florida and Tulane University, where the great Emmett Pere was still coaching. And Rice University, where Sammy Giamalvo was still coaching, and they had an unbelievable team at the time. So, but I did have, my heartstrings were sort of in the state of Florida. I traveled around the state for years as a junior, knew the state well, and knew the complex at the University of Florida well. I was recruited by Ray Graves, the director of athletics, not the tennis coach. And Ray Graves was very supportive, saying, we are going to have a great tennis program and you're our point man. And he sold me on the idea that they were going to invest in tennis. And that's why I ended up at Florida.
And that was probably about the time that the SEC started really, as you mentioned, putting some resources into some of their tennis programs, right? And because I would assume at that time, the major powers around the country certainly were like USC, UCLA, you mentioned Trinity. And you had an amazing career at Florida. We have some facts of Armistead on the screen. And one of them, of course, is a two-time All-American and undefeated at #1 in the SEC all 4 years. And Armistead, you're talking to someone who has the best record in the history of my school at #6, but the worst record in the history of my school at #1. Everybody has a great player. I don't care who you are. So for you to be undefeated, were you conscious of that while you were playing, or you were just playing, right? Whoever's in front of me, I got to beat this guy.
Basically, that's it. I just put my head down, and this is the guy I'm playing. How do I beat him? I really had no idea. I wasn't counting matches or anything like that. That wasn't the way I thought in that day. And I think most players, whoever you are, you're trying to be the best player you can. You're trying to beat the guy on the other side of the net, and you're not counting. I think if you're counting, you're putting more pressure on yourself unduly, and that will probably make you lose.
Yeah, well, that's true. But you know, the SEC, because I know what Mississippi State was a legitimate team then.
Yes.
Georgia, obviously, some of the other teams. Who were your main competition?
Of course, Vanderbilt. As you say, there were a handful of good players on every team. LSU. The players were recruited internationally. So a lot of times, like Bobby Bryan won the SEC championships the year before I did, and he was from Australia, a fine player, went to Mississippi State. So maybe there weren't American players, but they certainly were fine players from other parts of the world.
Right.
I think the SEC in the late to mid 60s, primarily American teams. Our team didn't have any international players. They were all from mostly from the state of Florida, but they were all American players. That wasn't by design, that just happened. And
okay.
So yeah, I think today's game, I think I read something not too long ago that 80% of the players who play are from out of the country in collegiate tennis, which is a huge number. But yeah. We were proud to be Floridians at the time, and we were proud to be Americans, and playing some of these guys from goodness knows where.
Right. So after your great career at Florida, you jumped in, obviously played some professional tennis for 7 or 8 years. I believe you won 11 titles on the tour. But you also joined the Army Reserves, right?
Well, I didn't have much choice.
Right, exactly. So
Yeah.
how were you able to balance the two? Did your military commitments get in the way of playing some of the professional side? How'd you balance that?
To find a spot. I learned I was about to be drafted into the Marine Corps.
Right.
At the time, they were short on men. The Vietnam War was raging. I got a spot in the Army Reserves. I didn't feel like I was combat ready by any stretch. So I went through the Army experience, which was fine. And then my commanding officer allowed me to spend time at the base doing whatever he wanted me to do. And then, because you have to spend some weekend time during each month, 2 days a month, and then 2 weeks during the summer, a week during the summer during training. So I would just stay home and go days in a row. Then he'd let me go off and travel.
Okay.
So that worked. It just so happened that our week's training, and my company was a logistics company, so we would transport in trucks to ships to landing craft, to bringing stuff back and forth, just all over the place. That was our job, and our training doing that was in St. Mary's, Georgia, in a pine forest the week before Wimbledon. And so I fly from the rattlesnake infested pine forest of St. Mary's to Wimbledon.
Right. No strawberries and cream in the pine forest?
Oh man, there are lots of bugs, but
Sure.
but no strawberries and cream.
Wow. So Armistead, another reason why I think people hold you in such high regard in the tennis community and all throughout Georgia is you're truly a visionary, and how you came about coming up with the concept, I believe with Larry Turville, right, of the World Association of Tennis Champions, or WATCH for short. Basically, what you did was you saw a need of lower level feeder events into the professional tour. And basically what you designed is really what's happening right now on the ITF Pro Circuits and the USTA Pro Circuits in terms of some of the futures events. And so where did you get that idea? And maybe briefly, how did it come about? I mean, just a brilliant visionary idea that the sport, probably as pro tennis started expanding in the 70s, really needed.
Well, I was, as they say, on the bubble player for most of my professional career. So I was hovering just out of the 100s in the ATP, of the ATP rankings. So the first 5-6 years of the ATP rankings wasn't terribly accurate, but it was something, a guideline for taking the discretionary entries of tournament directors and putting it on something concrete, meaning a ranking. So I was on the bubble, and there were literally hundreds of other players who wished to break into this newly formed ATP circuits, and of course the standards of Wimbledon and US Open and French, but there was really no avenue to do that. And so it was pretty easy to think that we really need something, a gateway, something that's unbiased and that we can use to encourage young players, because it's very easy to get discouraged. You talk to futures players of today, they'll tell you that depression is a big deal.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Oh, trust me, Armistead, I have more than one of my friends that, and hopefully nobody's listening from Godfrey, that told me they realized they didn't want to be a professional tennis player after the Godfrey Futures. It's tough out there. It really is.
It's really tough. And it was just as tough. Certainly the the caliber is a little higher now, but it wasn't any less tough. In fact, I think it may be a little more tough because there were no regulations to speak of. There was a limited amount of refereeing, if any. There was no standardizations of what balls you would use, what courts you would play on, what regulations would be enforced, what housing would be offered, nothing. And so as a player, you're saying, why can't we have several tournaments in a row on soft courts and then several tournaments in a row on hard courts? Doesn't that make sense? Why can't we have one ball instead of 4 different kinds of balls, which all play differently?
That's true.
Why can't we have one? And it's just all these why can'ts. And so I was playing the qualifying for the U.S. Championships held at Port Washington, hosted by Hy Zausner and his family. And it struck me that it was a ridiculous predicament. They were playing up to 8 and 9 qualifying matches to get into U.S. Championships. And you were being farmed out, not all the time, but on occasion, to somebody's court in their backyard and drinking water from a garden hose. That was qualifying for the U.S. Championships. It was absurd. And so I approached Larry, and we were both raised in Florida, and said, you know, there are a gazillion tennis clubs in Florida. We could sell this idea, and we can get sponsorships, and we can treat the players in a way they haven't been treated before, with equanimity. And so we went to a kind of a retreat. Larry his father had a retreat in Dunellen, Florida, and we wrote the book, so to speak. This is how we're going to have points for each match played, and you garner the points and you advance accordingly to the Grand Prix of tournaments. And eventually we were able to get sponsorships from Barnett Bank and other sponsors. I guess our biggest parlay was getting Schlitz Brewing Company to offer free beer to all the players and spectators.
Oh, nice.
Big deal.
Sure. On court too, or no, off court?
Well, very few players were so eager to win, we didn't touch the beer while we were playing.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, so and as a comic relief, we thought if only we could get one of these chicken companies to sponsor the tour, we can call it the Chicken Schlitz Tournament.
Right. So, that's funny.
But we were able to host over the years. It ran 7 years, from 1971 to 1970 through 1977. And I was the president for the first 3+ years, and we were a company of 3 people. And then we expanded. I think we got 4. Brian Early became one of the people who helped run this thing in the late 70s. So we were able to get $10,000 a tournament and ATP points from Jack Kramer and support from Glenn Hellman, and Bill Reardon threw in a little cash to help us get started. So we were off and running, but it, I think, helped the careers of many players. Scores of whom played Wimbledon. They're at that caliber. The players who won these tournaments were of Wimbledon caliber players. Sherwood Stewart, you could say that launched his career for sure. Other players who played at Andres Gomez and all these great players. So it was a place to play and a place to get ATP points.
Well, just even the fact that you were able to get the great, basically the father, whatever you want to call father professional tennis, Jack Kramer, involved. I mean, we spoke about this before. I mean, Jack's near and dear to me, and you as well. But how from a credibility standpoint, not only just maybe the money that he provided, was that that really provided some credence into what hey, we're on the right track here. This is the right idea.
Yes, exactly. Certainly, Jack Kramer, he was Mr. Tennis, and in my mind still is. When Jack Kramer thinks it's a good idea, you hold on to that and embrace that. Jack Kramer, the father of pro tennis, you could argue that Gladys Hellman, the mother of women's professional tennis, if they say it's a good idea and they're willing to support you, wow, that's
we're on to something. Yeah, but just an amazing. I mean, particularly when you're just out of college, starting to play, and you realize we really need this, and then you're able to convince those folks and the ATP, most importantly, right, to say, okay, we'll recognize this as a legitimate competition and as a kind of a feeder ranking system into our. I mean, that's one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard in tennis. So kudos to you for being a huge part of that.
I think people at the ATP, Jim McManus was a big part of. He thought the idea was a good one too, and he was behind the scenes kind of a kingmaker. You had Jim's support. That was also very good. So we're very proud of our links to those people, and we were proud of that 826 different players from around the world, probably 50, 60 different countries, participated.
So then after you kind of stepped aside from that, you actually went into kind of referee supervisor work for a little bit at this types of events. Were you able to work with people like Brian Early, who just retired as the referee of the US Open, even though he's still working, but he did retire from that position, and someone you and I know well, Gail Bradshaw. What was the motivation to do that, and some of the relationships that you were able to cultivate? Certainly, you as the level of player you were at probably helped you, right? Because you really knew what the players, what they really needed or wanted, and how they wanted to be treated on that side of the table. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I was just coming off of being the coach at the University of Alabama for 5 years, and I was sort of not sure where I wanted to go career-wise. I contacted Jones Zakala, who was the director of satellite tournaments for the USTA, which kind of stepped in where we left off in 1977, and so they just took our playbook and ran with it. And of course, they had funds to make that happen a little better than we could. So they changed it a bit, and they hired Gail and Brian to do a lot of the legwork, and John Heiss as well, who's a really good guy, and they did a really good job of making the tour more available. And when I say that, more available, it was publicized. They have a lot better network of apparatus to get the word out. And so I asked if I could join that team, and she said, well, yeah, you wrote the book, so why not?
Right, exactly. Exactly.
So I did that for a while, and of course, working with Gail was a pleasure. Brian he's a perfectionist kind of guy.
Yes.
A little more easygoing. Yeah, a little more easygoing, but certainly one with attention to detail and a very fair-minded guy. And so it was really fun to be around those guys and work with those guys and run tournaments in Texas and Florida.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned so much from Gail Bradshaw over the years, just how to be a better referee and supervisor. And these really, to me, are some of the heroes that really don't get any. And these folks, including us, we don't really want any credit, right? I mean, the best tournament is the one nobody knows who the referee is. But they're the real heroes out there, week to week at all these places, enforcing the rules, educating where necessary, and really trying to make sure that when the players jump up to the next level that they're prepared. So, I mean, I salute them, and I know you do as well, and you being a part of that, again, another way of figuring out here's a need and giving back to the sport. So Armistead, kudos to you on that. So then, of course, you throughout the years have really kept up your playing ability. I think that's probably the biggest understatement I'll probably say today. And the experience of playing for the team cup, the cup teams for the USTA and the ITF. Do you have a favorite team you were on in terms of a city you traveled to, or one of the competitions that stands out so much? And what does it mean to you to play for the United States on these cup teams?
Well, wearing the United States colors among 30 other countries just makes you proud. At least I feel that way. I was raised that way, and there's nothing that gives you greater pleasure. I think that's said when Davis players say that. That's their most memorable moments. And for us in the senior events, it's no less true. That we're very proud of that. One of the most memorable, if sad, events was we happened to be playing in Austria, in Velden, where it was held many years. The European Championships were held there many times as well, and still are. But it was 9/11, and we were playing, and somebody said, you have to go look at the TV, see what's going on. And of course, we were shocked, as was the world. And we got instructions, since we could go nowhere, the flights were frozen, and we were where we're going to be. But we got instructions to continue play, which we didn't understand, because that was the last thing we were thinking about was tennis at that point. But so it affected different people different ways. I was on a team with Brian Cheney and others, and we won the tournament. And the way we've played Australia in the final, and the way we were looking at it was, we're mad. We want to say to the world that we're not done. We're here, and we're going to stay here. So we played very well in the final with a lot of determination, I think.
Sure.
And it affected the ladies, on the other hand, in our particular age bracket differently. They were playing just crying the whole time.
Sure.
And so because they had relatives in the New York area and they didn't know what happened.
Right.
Well, anyway, that was the most memorable one. Certainly all of them are memorable. Playing in Turkey was great. I love to read ancient history, and Turkey is, with the Hittite Empire and the Akkadians and everything that's happened there through history. I just love to go to those places. And of course, that event, you see friends who you used to play as youngsters, and now you're seeing them and you're over 50 or over 60, and yeah, we're a shadow of what we were, but we're still best of friends. My friends aren't necessarily most of them aren't in Atlanta. They're all over the place. And the only time I get to see them and wish them well and give them a big hug is when I go play tennis somewhere.
Yeah, I've done a couple of these events, not as a player, as kind of a field referee or supervisor, and they're great events. I really enjoy the team events, and the level is very strong. I remember one year I showed up and the French women come in, and I'm like, that's Sandrine Testude. I'm pretty sure. And I looked at the roster, I'm like, yeah, that's her. Top 10 player not so long ago, and the level's great. But I've always been impressed with the camaraderie of all the nations and the players. I mean, yes, it's very competitive. Everybody wants to win, but everyone, to your point, I mean, people have known each other for years. Either played junior, some kind of places played college tennis together or against each other. and it's just a great event. So for you to be on 5 winning Cup teams, and also 26 gold balls, that's 26 more than I have, Armistead, just so you know. Although I'm preparing for the men's 90s, that's the one I'm going to win.
It's a game of attrition.
Yeah, I mean 26 gold balls. I mean it's not dodo level. Okay.
No.
I'm not going to go catcher, but
No.
so I mean, again, I think it's great. You've been active in the senior game, one of the great players. Certainly the events I've been at that you've played, people want to watch you play. His senior tennis has probably been a real positive to you, just in terms of a health-wise and being active. And can you talk about, your enjoyment of senior tennis as a whole?
Yes, I think the friendships are the most important thing. As you say, we compete. Yes, we want to win. More importantly, we love these guys. They are my friends. They are my family. And so it's more than just tennis. And that's what I think, as you say, going through the years of playing in the juniors, playing in the collegiate ranks, playing on the pro tour, many of these players I've known since I was 10. So it's amazing. I'm lucky enough up until recently to be able to run around in circles and not have it hurt too much. Whereas a lot of my good friends have had to stop playing competitively for one reason or another. I'm hoping to get back. I'm not sure that'll happen, but so we'll give it a shot. But this is family, and I think as you age, that's the way most players feel about other players. They're family.
Right. Well, and last thing here, Armistead, and thank you so much. It's an honor to have you join us today. The Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame, the members of it, again, I say this all the time, we'll put this group up against any other Hall of Fame at any sport. Just an amazing collection of players, coaches, contributors, you being one. So when you got the call that you were being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and I believe you went in with Michael Pernfors, if memory serves me correct, the class of 08. What was going through your mind? What does the Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame mean to you?
Well, being recognized by your peers, there is no greater honor. We just talked about how these players become family, and having your family members say you are worthy to be in this club, there's nothing more special than that. Being inducted with Michael Pernfors, a French Open champion, runner-up, I believe. Wow, I can't compare.
Well, you're a better grass court player than he was, I think, right?
I don't know about that either, but Mike's certainly very deserving and a superb player. And of course, attended the University of Georgia. So Michael is just a really nice guy too. So put that feather in his hat. But to be among these players, they are legendary, starting with, of course, Fitzy Grant. And so anytime you have a club named after you, something's going on, that you can be included in these types of players, this class of player. That's a great honor.
Yeah, and a couple of days ago, we announced the 2020 class, which unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we'll hopefully be able to celebrate them in 2021. That's Brian Bahaley and Craig Jones. Brian Bahaley, a fantastic player here in Georgia, went on to a great collegiate career. And of course, Craig Jones, a fantastic coach now in Macon, but been all over the state. So those two guys will join you and a bunch of others next year. And Armistead, you also were inducted into the Southern Hall of Fame, right, in 2014. I believe with Randy Stevens and Judy Utley.
Yes, and Randy just had a tennis center named after him. That's
yes.
Again, he's well thought of enough to have a 20-court facility named after him. He's doing something well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, well, Armistead, amazing player on the court, visionary off the court, probably that, you really can't better your visionary status. You can only equal it. We just really want to salute you. And thank you so much for joining us today. So folks, that's the 2008 Georgia Tennis Hall of Fame member Armistead Neely. We're really happy to catch up with him today. Check out our next episode soon. Thanks for watching.